The day of the hearing did not feel normal at all. The moment the news broke, social media went crazy. Reporters rushed outside the courthouse, cameras were everywhere, and everyone kept asking the same question: was this really serious? You won't believe how quickly this story shifted from celebrity gossip to possible prison time. Yep, you heard that right. Legal experts started talking about something that shocked fans. If these allegations were proven, Todd could have faced up to 5 years in jail. 5 years. That number alone changed the entire mood. Now imagine this. Todd walked into the courtroom trying to stay calm. Suit sharp. Face controlled. But let me tell you, when someone knows their future is hanging in the balance, it shows. People notice the tension, the tight jaw, the quiet whispers between him and his lawyers. It did not look like a regular court appearance. It looked serious. On the other side, Kandi appeared focused and steady. No dramatic reactions, no emotional outburst, just calm. And that calmness? It made the moment even more intense. This is how the energy in that room shifted. The prosecution started explaining the claims. They talked about questionable financial transfers, unusual account activity, possible hidden dealings. At first, some people thought maybe it was just business confusion. Maybe it was paperwork. But here is the shocking part. The lawyers said that if intent to hide or mislead was proven, the law allowed for penalties that could reach 5 years in prison. The second that possibility was mentioned, you could feel the tension rise. Whispers filled the room. And this is where it got interesting. This was not just about money. It was about trust. About whether actions had affected shared assets and partnerships. That made it personal. That made it bigger. Then documents were placed in front of the judge. Not rumors. Not online screenshots. Official paperwork. And suddenly, destiny took an unexpected turn. Because if those records showed a pattern instead of a mistake, the situation could become very serious. Now hold on. Todd's legal team did not stay silent. They argued that everything was part of normal business operations. They pushed back hard. They said there was no criminal intent. And that word, intent, became the center of everything. Because let me tell you something. In cases like this, proving intent changes everything. Without it, the case weakens. With it, the consequences grow fast. The craziest part? While all this was happening inside the courtroom, outside the internet was exploding. Headlines were already screaming about 5 years behind bars. Some people said it was overblown. Others believed it was just the beginning. Then the judge spoke, calm, direct, serious. He said that if strong evidence supported the claims in future proceedings, the court would consider the full extent of the law. That line hit hard. It was not a sentence. It was not a conviction. But it was a clear warning. When the session paused, cameras caught Todd talking quickly with his lawyers. Kandi stayed composed. And outside, one question kept repeating over and over. Could this really turn into a 5-year prison case? Nothing had been decided yet. But the possibility alone changed everything. And if this was only the first layer of evidence, then what could be coming next? As the hearing continued, the focus shifted deeper into the financial side of the case, and this is where it got even more intense. Because now it was no longer about general claims, it was about numbers, dates, transfers, patterns. The prosecution started breaking down what they called a financial trail. They talked about multiple transactions that allegedly moved through different accounts. Some of them, they suggested, were structured in a way that raised serious questions. Now let me tell you, when lawyers start using words like structured and layered, that's when things get serious. They explained that if money was intentionally routed in a way to hide its source or purpose, that could show intent. And remember what we said earlier? Intent is everything. Without intent, it could look like poor bookkeeping. With intent, it could look like a crime. You won't believe how quiet the courtroom became when timelines were displayed. Specific dates were mentioned. Amounts were discussed. The idea that this might not have been random mistakes started to settle in. But here is the shocking part. The prosecution hinted that some of these transfers may have affected shared assets and business partnerships. That meant this was not just about private accounts anymore. It could have impacted other people financially, and that changed the tone completely. Now, legal analysts outside the courtroom began explaining what this could mean. If prosecutors were able to prove that there was deliberate concealment or misrepresentation, sentencing guidelines under certain financial statutes could allow penalties that stretched up to 5 years. Yep, you heard that right again. 5 years was not just a rumor. It was being discussed as a legal possibility. But wait, the defense was not backing down. Todd's legal team pushed back strongly. They argued that these were normal business transactions. They said successful entrepreneurs often move funds between accounts for strategic reasons. They insisted there was no hidden motive. And honestly, that made things even more complicated. Because now the court was stuck between two very different stories. One side saying this was calculated concealment, the other saying it was standard business practice. This is where it got interesting in a whole new way. Legal experts watching the case said that if the defense could show legitimate business explanations for each transaction, the entire case could weaken. But if even one key transfer showed clear evidence of intent to mislead, it could strengthen the prosecution's argument dramatically. The craziest part? There were reports that a potential witness might testify about internal discussions related to these transactions. If that happened, it could shift everything. Because documents tell one story but insider testimony? That adds emotion and credibility. And let me ask you something. If someone from inside confirmed that funds were moved intentionally to avoid transparency, what would that do to the case? Destiny took an unexpected turn when the judge started asking detailed questions about specific transfers. Not general questions. Very specific ones. About timing. About reporting. About disclosure. That told everyone something important. The court was taking this seriously. Outside, social media was divided. Some people said this was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion. Others believed this was the beginning of real accountability. But here is the bigger twist. Legal commentators began discussing the possibility of a plea deal. If the risk of a 5-year sentence was real, would Todd consider negotiating? Would prosecutors offer a reduced sentence in exchange for cooperation? Now that possibility changed everything. Because a plea deal would mean avoiding the uncertainty of trial, but it would also mean accepting some level of responsibility. And at this point, nothing was clear. The hearing ended without a final decision, but one thing became obvious. The 5-year possibility was no longer just dramatic headline language. It was part of the real legal conversation. And as Todd walked out of the courthouse again, cameras flashing, one question grew louder. Was this heading toward trial? Or toward a deal behind closed doors? By this point, the courtroom drama had spilled far beyond those 4 walls. The legal battle was still unfolding. But outside, a completely different storm had started. Social media was on fire. Clips from the hearing were being analyzed frame by frame. Headlines were getting more dramatic by the hour. And everywhere you looked, people were asking the same thing. Was Todd really facing 5 years? Or was this just pressure from the prosecution? You won't believe how divided the public had become. Some fans were saying this was accountability finally catching up. Others believed it was being exaggerated to damage his reputation. And that's when the case stopped being just legal. It became personal for millions watching. Let me tell you something. When public opinion enters the chat, everything changes. Commentators started breaking down the financial arguments in simple terms. They explained how proving intent could unlock serious penalties. They also explained how hard it actually was to prove that someone deliberately tried to mislead. This is where it got interesting in a new way. Legal analysts began pointing out that even if the maximum sentence allowed up to 5 years, judges rarely jump straight to the maximum unless the evidence is overwhelming. That created a new layer of suspense. Was the 5 years number a real threat? Or was it a ceiling that might never actually be reached? The craziest part was how fast rumors started spreading. Anonymous sources claimed there were more documents. Others hinted at possible recordings. Nothing officially confirmed, but enough to keep everyone guessing. And then came another twist. During a follow-up session, prosecutors reportedly emphasized that this was not just about technical accounting mistakes. They suggested there was a pattern. A pattern, if proven, could show awareness and intent. That word again, pattern, because one isolated mistake is one thing. A repeated behavior? That's something else entirely. Destiny took an unexpected turn when legal insiders started talking about how the judge's body language had changed during certain explanations. They said he leaned forward more when timelines were discussed. He asked sharper questions when intent was mentioned. That detail alone made people nervous. Meanwhile, Todd's defense team appeared more active than ever. They requested time to respond to certain financial claims. They hinted that additional documentation would be presented. They wanted to show that business complexity had been mistaken for wrongdoing. And honestly, that added another layer of doubt. Because what if this really was complicated business structure being misunderstood? What makes this story different is that both sides had arguments that sounded strong. On one hand, structured transfers raised suspicion. On the other, successful businesses often move money strategically. So where was the truth? Public debate kept growing. Some said a plea deal was coming soon. Others believed Todd would fight this all the way through trial. And if it went to trial, the 5-year possibility would remain hanging over everything like a shadow. But here's the part that kept everyone hooked. The judge had not shown his hand yet. No emotional reaction, no strong language, just careful listening. And when a judge listens more than he speaks, that usually means he is weighing every detail carefully. As the session closed again, there was still no final ruling. No confirmed sentence. Just growing pressure. And the question became even bigger. If new evidence appeared in the next hearing, would that push the case closer to the maximum penalty? Or would the defense finally flip the narrative? Because at this point, one thing was clear. This was no longer just about reputation. It was about risk. Real risk. And the possibility of 5 years was still very much on the table. Everyone knew this was the moment that could shift everything. The courtroom was packed again. Reporters were ready. Social media was already counting down. You won't believe how intense the silence felt when the judge entered the room. This was it. After weeks of arguments, financial breakdowns, debates about intent, and nonstop public speculation, everything now came down to how the court saw the evidence. Let me tell you, when a case reaches this stage, even small details can carry massive weight. The prosecution repeated their strongest point. They said this was not random confusion. They argued that the pattern of transactions showed awareness. They reminded the court that if intent to conceal had been proven, the law allowed penalties that could stretch up to 5 years. That number echoed in the room again. 5 years. Not a rumor, not a hashtag, a legal possibility. But here is the shocking part. The defense did not argue emotionally. They focused on logic. They explained that complex business operations often looked suspicious to outsiders. They insisted there was no criminal mindset behind the transfers. They argued that poor structure did not equal criminal intent. This is where it got interesting one last time, because now it was no longer about public opinion. It was about how the judge interpreted intent. If he believed there was deliberate concealment, the consequences could be serious. If he believed it was mismanagement without criminal purpose, the outcome could be far lighter. Destiny took an unexpected turn when the judge began summarizing the case out loud. He talked about responsibility. He talked about transparency. He talked about the seriousness of financial trust. Every word felt calculated. The craziest part? He made it clear that celebrity status meant nothing inside that courtroom. The law applied the same way to everyone. That statement alone shifted the mood completely. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The judge explained that while the maximum exposure under the law could reach 5 years, sentencing always depended on final proof, context, and degree of intent. He did not rush. He did not dramatize. He simply made it clear that the possibility had been real. And that changed everything. Even without a dramatic announcement in that second, the message was powerful. The risk had been serious. The pressure had been real. And the case had shown how quickly financial questions could turn into criminal exposure. Outside the courthouse, reactions exploded again. Some people said justice was close. Others said the system was too harsh. Some believed this had been a warning more than a punishment. But one thing was certain: the 5-year shadow had forced everyone to see the situation differently. What makes this story different is that it was never just about a headline. It was about how fast public image could collide with legal reality. It was about how business decisions, if questioned, could carry life-changing consequences. And even now, questions remained. Would there be an appeal if things moved forward? Would new information surface later? Would this case become a long legal fight? Or would it settle quietly behind closed doors? Because sometimes the biggest twist is not the sentence itself. It is the uncertainty that follows. And as people left the courthouse that day, one thought stayed in everyone's mind. Was this truly the end of the storm? Or just the calm before another unexpected turn? So now I want to hear from you. What do you really think about this whole situation? Do you believe the 5-year possibility was justified based on what we discussed? Or do you think it was pushed too hard? If you were in that courtroom, would you have seen this as accountability or misunderstanding? And honestly, do you think this story is truly over? Or is another twist waiting around the corner? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I read them all, and your opinion might even shape the next video. If you found this breakdown helpful and interesting, make sure you hit that like button so more people can join the discussion. Share this video with anyone who has been following this case. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because if any new update drops, you already know we'll be talking about it here first.